comparative perspective from around the world. Ma'am earned a master's in social work degree from University of Minnesota and is currently pursuing a doctor of social work degree from University of Kentucky. Her research is focused on the intersection of the family court system and the mental health system. Her alma mater includes Cornell University, MIT Sloan School of Management, Howard Law School, Hamlin University, and Michelle Hamlin School of Law. She is one of only 3 American mediators appointed to the Mediate Guru Global Advisory Board and holds a seat on the board of directors for Association of Family and Conciliation Court in Minnesota. Ma'am has taught mediation to thousands of students from over 100 countries and has been published by the legal website Legitimate Scrutiny. She guest lectured to psychology graduates at Harvard University in 2022, and her writing was part of the course's curriculum. Maureen Ma'am held a seat on the Minnesota State Bar Association's ADR Council and was co-chair of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Subcommittee. Ma'am has presented to thousands of lawyers, judges, legislators, law students, and therapists. She worked with survivors of intimate partner violence, their children, and the abusive party for close to a decade, which inspired her work in ADR and mental health. Thank you so much, ma'am, for running this.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I realize I should put less on there because it would make me not appear quite so old. I've had a long time in the field, but I should maybe not make that as clear. Well, thank you so much for coming. I'm so grateful and I'm very excited to meet all of you. I'm not sure it's possible I've met some of you. I used to judge mediation competitions internationally, and there was some extraordinary talent in those competitions. If we can start just with the title slide. Oh, I can see that. Perfect. Thank you. We'll never know what anything was for if near is just as far away as far. That's a song lyric by one of my favorite bands. It's making a simple but profound statement about communication. By the end of my lecture, I am hoping one of you students will be very brave and will tell us what meaning you take from that song lyric by the end. If you can go to the next slide, please. My number one goal for this webinar is that it is useful for you or that you find value in it. Please ask questions at any time or express your thoughts on any of the information. I'm here to serve you, your needs or interests, not to hear myself speak. All of you is what interests me most. So please do not hesitate to question or speak. My time here is to serve you. My next goal for this session is to help you become better communicators and mediators and lawyers. I designed a multi-pronged approach with the recognition that some of this information and some techniques are not going to resonate with you, and some of them will. Each of you are individuals with your own life story, your own strengths, and your own experiences. My hope is that some part of this discussion today will elicit or incite some curiosity, excitement, or interest, and you'll build on that by thoughtfully exploring the areas that interest you. I apologize, I'm just getting over a cold, so if you hear me sniffle or cough, that's what's going on. I'll give you some brief foundational information about neuroanatomy. Next, I'd like to explore some mental health strategies, reflect on communication techniques and constraints, then finish with some suggestions for finding your own style. If you can advance to slide 1, please. Oh, I'm sorry, my computer just did something odd. There we go. Thank you. Because all communication begins in the brain, that's where we're going to start. I want to share one of my favorite descriptions of the brain circuitry, written by David Eagleman in his book, Incognito, The Secret Lives of the Brain. I cannot recommend that book enough. It's fascinating and exciting and just amazing. David writes, your brain is built of cells called neurons and glia, hundreds of billions of them. Each one of these cells is as complicated as a city, and each one contains the entire human genome and traffics billions of molecules in intricate economies. Each cell sends electrical impulses to other cells, up to hundreds of times per second. If you represented each of these trillions and trillions of pulses in your brain by a single photon of light, the combined output would be blinding. The cells are connected to one another in a network of such staggering complexity that it bankrupts human language and necessitates new strains of mathematics. A typical neuron makes about 10,000 connections to neighboring neurons. Given the billions of neurons, this means that there are as many connections in a single cubic centimeter of brain tissue as there are stars in the Milky Way galaxy. Please take just a moment to marvel at that complexity in our brains. David's description is extraordinary and accurate. The brain goes through tremendous growth in our early years and then goes through at least 2 periods of pruning. In this process of pruning, the brain gets rid of neural pathways that are not being used. In the pathways that are being used very frequently, called myelination, there'll become a sheath around that along the pathway. This is one of the reasons that some behaviors are so difficult to change, because these pathways we use continually are so much quicker to be utilized. When we're asking people to make conscious choices and to weigh options, which is what we do in mediation, we need to give them more time to process that information. If you can, build in some type of time process so people's answers are not immediate. If they're immediate, it's probably going to be a myelinated pathway coming in. If you can advance one slide, please. The brain is organized into, well, there are 2 separate parts of the brain that are necessary for verbally processing information. Wernicke's area is in the left temporal lobe. This area decodes spoken language and written language. Broca's area, also in the left temporal lobe, is responsible for producing speech. Here is where sentences are formed, while in Wernicke's area, they are decoded. The autonomic nervous system, which is part of your peripheral nervous system, contains the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. These systems govern unconscious actions, such as the sympathetic nervous system dumping adrenaline into one system in an emergency, or the parasympathetic stamping out that message once the emergency has passed. The prefrontal cortex, which is right here in the very front of your skull, in your brain right here, is the last area to fully develop, and it makes possible executive functions, such as controlling one's attention, being able to think through and foresee possible consequences of one's actions, reasoning, and making decisions. You'll see online, if you look for it, people often give the age of 25 or 27 until that prefrontal cortex is fully developed. We don't actually know. Probably has a lot to do with individual genetics and environment, stimulation, but that's why we don't hold children to the same level of responsibility that we would to adults. If you can advance one, please. When we're born, we are completely without the ability to emotionally regulate ourselves. Infants and small children rely on their caregivers to co-regulate their emotional responses. As we age, we attain the ability to regulate our own emotional responses in most situations. However, conflict is not necessarily a normal situation, and some adults have trouble regulating their emotions during conflict. I'm sure that you have all experienced that for yourself and seen that in others. One part of your job as a mediator is to help co-regulate the emotions of your client. There are many ways to set the stage for this, but I'd like to talk about that after we watch a short clip. The video is of a famous experiment that has been repeated on different populations, genders, and cultures, and found to be valid across all of them. The video I'd like to show you to discuss is called the experiment is called the still face experiment with babies. Please watch closely. Dr. Verma, if you could play that.
Yes.
Please.
Yes.
It's short. It's only about 3 minutes.
Yes, I'm just playing that video.
I'm just going to turn my camera off while it's on.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby who's about a year of age.
I'm like a girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her. This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this, and then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it, they actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on, that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
Thank you, Dr. Verma. I
Welcome, ma'am.
appreciate it very much. If we can stop for one moment, I just wanted to ask any students who are feeling exceptionally brave to tell me what they noticed during that video of the baby. Okay, we'll keep going and maybe some more things will come up. So that video does not describe the parties to a conflict involved with mediation, obviously. But I wanted to show it because some of the same processes are happening underneath the surface in adults. What's particular to the world of mediation is that people often hear the word neutral and equate it with blankness or a lack of emotion, hence the still face. If we approach clients this way, we'll cause them to dysregulate, although it's doubtful we would see any of the physical symptoms we saw in the infant. Please close your eyes just for a quick minute and think back to a conversation that you had where the person you were talking to gave you zero feedback, either verbally or non-verbally. We're just going to sit with that for a few seconds. If you can remember those feelings, you probably found yourself over-explaining your position just to try to get that reaction or expression from the person you were talking to. I would encourage you to try this out on other people and see how they respond. Ask them how they feel afterwards. So don't do this with someone that may be hurt by this, but family, friends who you can trust, try it in that way. The truth about communication is that we are always communicating. It's an endless loop, although we may not always be speaking. When we're near other people, we're talking in reams of information, taking in reams of information from their speech and their nonverbal communication or body language. Nonverbal communication and verbal communication must be in harmony with each other. Interestingly, one's emotional state does not match one's verbal state or physical state, such as the huge smiles made out of makeup on clowns' faces, this causes people to become very uncomfortable and dysregulated. This is a type of outward cognitive dissonance and explains why small children are often frightened by clowns. Research studies show that when your oral communication does not match your body language, people have the belief that your body language is telling the truth and your words are not true. If you doubt this, I encourage you to watch some true crime where they show interrogation videos. And if you turn off the sound and key in on the body language and then go back and replay, you can see from the other person's perspective why they didn't believe what was being said. I'd like to give you another perspective on this from the world of mental health in order to illustrate how powerfully our perceptions can be influenced without any conscious thought. Capgras syndrome is when a person believes that their family or friends have been replaced by exact duplicates, clones, or aliens. The person will say the family members look exactly as they should, but they're not the right person. Capgras syndrome sounds like the beginning of a science fiction movie. However, it is completely real. It's believed to be caused by underlying structural damage to the neocortex, so that though the person can visually recognize the person, they don't experience inside the usual feelings of recognition they would with a familiar person. This lack of healing, which is part of our recognition and communication reception, is so profound that the immediate reaction is an immovable belief that it simply cannot be the person themselves. They must be a clone, perfect copy, or alien. In one famous case of Capgras syndrome, a young man who had very close relationships with his parents was convinced that they had been replaced by exact copies when they visited him in person. However, this same young man believed he was speaking to his father, the real one, not the copy, if he only spoke to his father on the phone. This is because of how our unconscious mind processes information, and that different areas process either visual or verbal information. The neuroanatomical structural damage the young man had sustained did not interfere with the verbal data processing, so he did have the familiar feelings of recognition when he would speak with his father. But those feelings would be missing when he saw his father, hence his belief that his father was replaced by a copy. This is extremely confusing and very hard to deal with in mental health, but that's the underlying principle. Our brains pick up on more than 11 million pieces of information per second unconsciously. Our conscious mind can process 40 pieces of information per second. So our unconscious mind processes 27,500 times more data than our conscious minds. Your clients will be processing much more data unconsciously than they are consciously. Your nonverbal communication will be a massive part of that data, so to be as aware as possible. And if you wanted this slide, I think that was slide 7. There was a really interesting study that was conducted on men, young men, to look at pictures of women and rate whether they found them attractive or not. All of the pictures were the same. They're about like an 8 by 10 size. I don't know what that is in centimeters. 8 by 10 inches. And consistently across a clear cross-section of a population, these men found certain women more attractive, and they couldn't consciously explain why that was. Those photos had been altered to make the women's pupils 2 millimeters or less bigger than in the other photos. The men had no idea why they found these women more attractive. Well, it was their body processing the unconscious data in the unconscious mind that when a partner is willing and available for some type of sexual activity, their pupils are slightly larger. And men were picking that up even though they couldn't tell why they felt that way. It's really interesting if you dig into the research onto all the unconscious decisions we're making. If you go to slide 8, please. We are often unaware of our own body language and how we may appear to other people. Any amount of insight that we can gain into our own nonverbal communication is invaluable. Only when we're aware of something can we change it or design it. I have 2 main suggestions for how to make yourself aware of your body language. First, schedule a Zoom meeting with a friend and another Zoom meeting with a colleague. It's important to see how your body language differs by the situation you are in. Ask for permission, consent matters, to record the Zoom meeting. Only after you've obtained that permission, start the meeting and record it. Immediately after the meetings, watch the meeting while completely disregarding the other party. Please focus only on yourself. I'm fully cognizant that this may be uncomfortable. It's not always fun to see yourself recorded, but I promise it is worth it. The first time you watch the recording, do so with the sound off. Just pay attention to your body language and try to remember exactly what you were thinking or feeling. See if you can identify how you were feeling based solely on your body language. Watch the recording a second time, but with the sound on. Pay close attention to see if your verbal communication matched your nonverbal communication. For example, if you were asking questions, was your body language open, relaxed, and focused on the person speaking? Were you doing other things than just listening? Sometimes in mediations, we can be frustrated by the way our clients are not communicating, but it may be the way we are communicating that is affecting our clients. I would encourage you to try this technique with television shows or movies. Watch with the sound off and see if you can pick up on the emotions of a scene. Then watch it with the sound on and see if that matches. This can also be kind of fun to do if you're out in public. Go to a park with a friend, an insightful one if possible, and discreetly watch other people have a conversation. See if you can decode from their body language the relationship between the two people and how their discussion is playing out. Do this together so you and your very insightful friend can learn from each other. I was having dinner once with my husband, and we saw another couple at the table next to us, and we're both curiosity junkies. So we were trying very discreetly to see what was going on, and we couldn't hear the conversation, but we could see the body language. We both felt it was a first date. We both felt that the young man felt it was going very well, and the young lady was not so happy and just wanted to get out of there. I did meet her in the bathroom later, and that was exactly what was playing out. But it was interesting that the young man wasn't picking up on her very reserved body language. You can find lots of things to do that way. Please don't do anything that would be creepy, like don't watch people outside of public places. If you can go to slide 9, please. This is another quote from one of my favorite bands. I'm leaning on this broken fence between past and present tense. I love this lyric. The band is called The Weaker Thans because it perfectly encapsulates how our past and present coexist. The communication styles one becomes used to as a child, then as a student, and as a professional may affect our ability to regulate our own emotions and the arousal of our sympathetic nervous system. This is especially true of our clients. Any past communication between the clients may color how they are experiencing the current communication and its intent. As it was stated in my intro, I used to work as a family law mediator, and I specialized in families that had experienced domestic violence or child abuse. Domestic violence has this insidious use of language that may not be visible to anyone outside of the past relationship. For example, I was once in a mediation session where the mediator went between 2 separate rooms. In the United States, we call that shuttle mediation. I'm not sure if you have a specific term that you use. I'm sorry that I don't know that. And if anyone wants to let me know after, that would be great, because I'd like to learn. So the mediator came into the room where the wife was and told her that the husband had requested to be allowed to take their children to Canada for a trip. The wife went pale and started shaking. On the face of it, that request was pretty normal in the region that I'm from. So clearly something else was going on. And the mediator was clued into that. It came out that the last time the husband and wife had spoken, the husband had told the wife he planned to kill her and take their children to Canada where no one would find them. That husband was sending a threat through the mediator. They were mediating a financial settlement for their divorce, and he was letting her know not to take too much or he would kill her. Now, most cases are absolutely not that dramatic, but remember, you're communicating with a person's whole self and their whole history. How we communicate is shaped most often in our young developmental stages. We learn more and we change over time, but the remnants of those early years are still with us. Be gentle. If you're interested in mediating those types of cases, I have a whole other thing that we can talk about, because how we use words, especially in domestic violence, matters. We don't want to be a vector through which threats are made or received. Are we on slide 10? Perfect, thank you. It's always the mediator's job to be culturally competent in the space you are working in. If it's a specific group, search out information so you can make sure you're offering an appropriate space. I work with some Native American clients that are part of the Ojibwe band. I needed to learn a lot about this culture because there were many different things from the culture that I'm from. One thing is they show respect for a speaker or an elder by not using direct eye contact. They also show respect by not speaking much when they first meet you. In the culture I come from, we usually use eye contact to denote respect, and we do offer from ourselves if asked. Make sure you're open to understanding any aspect of your client's identities. Some differences are small, and others might be big. One example of word differences that I enjoy, how people from the United Kingdom and people from the United States view the word scheme very differently. While we agree on the denotation of the word, which would be the dictionary definition, we have very different ideas of the connotation of the word. In the United Kingdom, the word scheme is often used interchangeably with plan or program. In the United States, the word scheme has a negative connotation and usually refers to something fraud. Pay attention to these differences. These may even be as simple as what color you choose to wear. In some cultural groups, colors have important meanings. In the Ojibwe culture, red represents life and vitality. Purple represents oneself. Yellow represents healing. And white can symbolize a new beginning. Choosing the color I wear can make an instant impression, whether that is positive or negative. Since silence is communication. I feel like I haven't used a lot of silence, except when I clearly tried to goad one of you into answering a question earlier. Research shows that many people are uncomfortable with silence, unless it is shared with people that they have a deep personal connection to. You may need to utilize silence on occasion. I prefer the word utilize than weaponize, but you could see it either way. Most adults in the United States cannot handle more than 30 seconds of absolute silence in a meeting setting. When you use silence, the other person generally gives much more detail about their point of view. Use wisely and sparingly, as this can also activate some defensiveness if you're not careful. Please think about your own relationship with silence. Does it make you uncomfortable? Has it activated your defensiveness in the past? Is there a cultural component to how silence is perceived? Is your response to silence different depending on whether it is in a professional or personal context? I often use silence in my professional roles, and I find it helpful. I also use silence in my personal life. I'm the mother of 3 lovely children. When I suspect that they have committed some transgression, I question them. And if they're not giving much information, I bring out silence. I'll ask them a simple question, and they may respond with a word or a simple sentence. Then I sit in silence while maintaining eye contact. None of them can last more than 15 seconds before they spill all the details. They really are terrible with silence. Silence is a very powerful interrogator. Please use this superpower wisely. Think about its use before you use it. Remember that when you're communicating with a client, you are communicating with that client's entire historical self. I love chess. I love the tactics. I love the elegance of the attack. I even love the soul-crushing defeat of a checkmate. But what I think is salient to this discussion on communication and mediation is that there's always an advantage in being the one that chooses the opening. As the mediator, you begin the session. Your communication choices set the tone. You are modeling your expectations and are charting the course for the mediation. This is a tremendous advantage. Do not waste it. Later stages of mediations can be reactive or improvisational like jazz, but the opening can be planned out. Practice your opening until you are completely comfortable with it. Make sure your opening is relaxing for you. Become like the eventualities. Plot out as much as you can in advance and practice until you can perform this in your sleep. If you're comfortable enough in your opening, you can use that time to observe the party's reactions to the information in your opening through their nonverbal communication and their body language. This information can help you tailor your approach and the next phase. If you can go to the next slide. For those of you that are law students, and I don't know if this entire group is law students, you probably learned many communication strategies. One of the most important in trial law is that you never ask a question you do not know the answer to when you are cross-examining a witness. Never. In mediation, it is the opposite. Always ask questions you don't know the answer to. Be open and curious to understand more about the parties. Your questions do not need to focus solely on the problem the parties are there to solve. Social workers and therapists often conduct difficult interviews, and they've created some great techniques that you can utilize. When I'm working with a family where one parent has a substance abuse problem, for example, they can often be really defensive about being asked about that. When we're defensive, we're not engaging the prefrontal cortex in our brains. And as I'm sure you all recall from earlier, the prefrontal cortex is the so-called wise center of our brains. It is involved in executive functions like planning ahead, weighing alternatives, and anticipating future consequences. In order to avoid that parent becoming defensive, you can start by asking what they like about the substance they're using. For example, if they like to drink alcohol, ask what they like about it. What does it do for them? How do they feel? And then truly listen to their answer. I cannot stress this part enough. It does not work if you are not really open and really listening. Not planning what you're going to say next, but really listening. You have to be sincere. And then you can summarize what they said back to them. There might be an opening for you to ask if there's anything they don't like about drinking. Sometimes people learn more when they hear the words from themselves. Use that. In another example, in a civil case, you can ask the party what they like about the status quo. What's working for them? Listen intently, and then follow up by asking what they do not like about it, and let them hear themselves. When you're drafting an agreement, ask each party about each word. Ask if they think a different word would be a better choice. If they suggest one, ask them to explain why they like what they like better about that word. Why does it fit better? Word choice in drafting is so important because after the session is over, it's only this agreement that'll be enforced or followed. That is why every single word must be accurate to what the parties believe they're agreeing to. It also offers more ownership of the agreement by the parties, so they're much more likely to follow it in the future. When people become emotional in mediation sessions, do not lean away from the emotion. Lean into it. Ask what they're feeling. Ask them why they think they're feeling that way. This gives the party the opportunity to uncover exactly how they're feeling and invites them to not just push away their feelings. As professionals, we are sometimes uncomfortable with emotions, especially strongly expressed emotions. I want to give you an example from mental health, why being connected to these emotions is crucial for making decisions. In neurology, most knowledge comes from studying people that either have a genetic abnormality or have had a significant accident that damaged some part of their brain. The reason that we learn this way is because it's considered unethical to give someone brain damage just to study the results. A patient we will call patient M was a successful executive when he was in an accident. He sustained multiple injuries to his body as well as damage to his brain. As he recovered, he and his family were hopeful he would be back to his old self soon. However, the brain damage he sustained was to the area of the brain that processed emotions. In 6 months after his accident, he had lost his career as an executive, his wife, and his relationship with his children and friends. Now, conventional wisdom would say that by not being able to process emotions, he would be very rational and would be able to make rational decisions because emotion wouldn't be interfering. However, he was unable to make any decisions. At work, he might spend the entire day just reorganizing files or putting paper clips away. or working on meaningless or unimportant tasks. He was unable to make any decisions due to his inability to prioritize tasks or relationships, because to prioritize something, one needs to use their emotions. For example, if my stove is on fire and I need to write thank you notes to friends, it's easy for me to prioritize which task should be attempted first. I would put the stove out and then maybe get to the thank you notes later, depending on the damage. Emotions are guide rails for decisions. Do not turn away from emotions in mediations. Please lean into them. Remember that part of the need that mediation satisfies is the need to feel completely heard. Many times people need to be heard before they can ever focus on solving the issue or the problem. The goal of asking questions is not just to elicit answers or information. It's to allow people to feel heard and for them to be able to hear themselves. This is often where we find real breakthroughs, when a person can hear how they're sounding to someone else, or when they hear it for themselves the first time and say, you know, that felt different in my head than how it just sounded coming out. If we can go to slide 12, please. Or I'm sorry, I'm on 12, I meant 13. So my goal today was to help each of you become better mediators by becoming better communicators. I hope to do that by inviting you to think about how and why we communicate. Please play around with communication. It can be a lot of fun. In my home country of the United States, I often heard our past president, Barack Obama, be referred to as our African-American president, Obama. I've also heard former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton referred to as female Secretary of State Clinton. But I've never heard anyone ever refer to President Abraham Lincoln as male President Lincoln or Caucasian President Washington. I was intrigued by this difference, so when I was teaching at a law school campus, I started describing people this way. I got a few odd looks, but people are generally very respectful when you're guest lecturing, so it took a while before someone said something to me. One student finally asked me why I referred to George Washington as our male President Washington. I asked him why he thought that was odd, and we discussed the examples that I just gave. The class I was teaching came to the conclusion that when people add modifiers like female or African American in front of titles, it's their way of telling people that they do not belong, that they are not the normal version of these things, the expected version. We learned a lot about the subtlety of communication in class that day. Please test these things out. See how people react to your changing communication norms. Test them out in all sorts of ways, especially if you're on a college campus. There are a lot of people to talk to, a lot of people that might be interested. I'm very grateful for all of your kind attention today. Would anyone feel brave enough to give a try to tell us what they think the lyric in the beginning was trying to communicate? As a reminder, it was, "We will never know what anything was for if near is just as far away as far." Any takers?
If anyone wants to ask question, please, this is the time, and you can clear your doubt. And if you have any queries, you can ask.
I would just
If there are no,
go ahead.
yes, yeah. If there are no students, I actually have one question, ma'am. I just wanted to get your opinion on something that sometimes you see there are court-appointed mediation sessions, and there are sometimes pre-arbitration mediation required for to move ahead with arbitration. So I wanted to get your thought on that. Like when you're forcing something that should definitely come out from both the parties' side consentfully. So what is your thought on that sort of mediation, like court mandated mediation or pre-arbitral mediation?
So I'm in two fields where we're really big on consent. One would be mediation. The other would be therapy. I am often sent people from the court that are court ordered to get therapy from me. I dislike that as well. Mediation needs to be a voluntary process. So should therapy. You can't force someone to bare their soul. However, I do understand why the court is attempting that, because we see a lot better long-term outcomes. I don't approve, I understand. In the past, when I've had court-ordered people for mediation, I set up the mediation, I explain about why it needs to be voluntary. I explain I can write a letter as long as they both show up to the mediation. They don't have to agree on anything. I write a letter saying that they showed up. I usually also put in a pitch for, but since we're here, why not just play around a little bit? Why not just test a few things out? I do know of some attorneys that use them as fishing expeditions, which I guess fair enough. I don't particularly enjoy that, but
will it be wrong to say that forced mediation like these, like court-appointed mediation or pre-arbitral mediation, they're not as effective as general mediation exercises are?
True, I don't believe that they are in the least. It's certainly my personal experience and some research that I've seen. It's especially unhelpful in divorces, I have found.
So I have recently started working in the area of arbitration, and I'm seeing many arbitration agreement come with this pre-arbitration mediation clause where they have to mandatory go through a mediation before they can go ahead with arbitration. And whatever case that I've come across, I've only seen the unsuccessful mediation cases because parties usually skip arbitration for that matter as well and go ahead directly with a legal proceeding. So I just wanted to ask, is there any change or any shift that you're noticing with regards to pre-arbitration mediation, or people, are they actually using it, or are they just going ahead with the arbitration clause? I'm just looking from where you come from and from your perspective how things look.
Well, I think the arbitrators never see the people where the mediation worked out for. So there might be a slightly skewed perspective. Because I only worked with, for the most part, my perspectives can be skewed when I see so much domestic violence around me. But that's what I worked with, so it's a little bit self-selecting. I'm not against the option. I think mediation is fantastic. I think it can have great long-term outcomes. However, in forced mediation, I generally see it's more time, money, and mostly useless, which is frustrating. And I think it also gives mediation as a whole a bad rap, where people are unhappy. And when you mention mediation, they just remember being forced to do something that they paid money for that they didn't want to. So I think it's unhelpful on the whole.
Actually, a very famous senior arbitrator here in India, and he said this, that the future of mediation and arbitration for general ADR looks brilliant in India, looks good in India, because the future of litigation is not looking really great right now. So I just wanted to share this with you and get your thought on it, and how what do you think about this thought, because he definitely is an authority in arbitration. So this coming from him is a big thing. That's why I wanted to share this with you as well. And what are your thoughts on this?
I appreciate hearing that. He sounds brilliant. I would say that it is very similar in the United States for a variety of reasons. One of them is that our court system just cannot handle the volume of people. I would also say that due to the economy, so many more people are finding mediation to be a better option for them. They may feel that they're not getting their day in court as they feel, or they're validated by an external authority, but they would rather keep the $50,000 they would have spent. And when you think about the emotions involved, and then for me, the long-term negative outcome for families, unless we either radically expand our court system, which I don't think is a great option, I think it's a great growth path. I mean, through a negative way, but a great growth path. And I think people will come to value it more and more going forward.
Right. Judicial congestion is a shared problem here in India as well. And one thing that I think it's common here with why mediation is taking its time to take off is that people are looking, like almost every time people are looking for some sort of judicial validation as well. Like whenever judicial intervention is there, everybody is satisfied and comfortable that this is a judicially valid approach. So I think that might be one of the reasons why mediation is still yet to take over.
I think so. When I do speak with people where they'll tell me they want their day in court, I'll ask what that really means. And is it about the external validity, or is it about being really heard? And I generally explain to them the court system doesn't work, at least where I'm at, the way you think it is. You're not going to get up there and be able to just say all the things and it all be taken in. Anything you've seen on Law and Order doesn't exist, pretty much, in the United States. But then in mediation, you can be really heard. I also give the kind of twin carrot and stick approach, whereas because I deal with families, you know your family best. This judge doesn't know you. They don't know that your middle child requires this. They don't know this. Would you be happier, maybe not getting everything, but the two of you designing this together? You're much more likely to get something that you can live with
Right.
than with an external authority.
Right. So since you specifically deal with family cases related to mediation, there's actually one incident I heard about. So it's more like a funny experience a person faced with regards to mediation, and while litigation is not the right approach, specifically with related in matters of family law, that he went ahead to and discussed with a lawyer about his divorce proceeding, and he wanted to go ahead with the divorce, and he discussed with the lawyer. He shared whatever problems he is facing in the marriage and all that, and he gave the lawyer a few days, and then the lawyer prepared whatever petition in the file that he went ahead with. And when finally the person who reached out to the lawyer, when he finally read the document, he realized, because the lawyer is looking to get ahead with the divorce proceeding, and he does not have a mediating approach. He read the whole file, the person read the whole file, and realized so many things that he has went through that he was not aware of. So this is basically the problem with dealing with family matters from a direct judicial approach, or a straight up legal approach, that to say, and not going ahead with mediation. That will be it from my end, ma'am. I just wanted to get your opinion on few things, and just to get some idea like how it looks there, how mediation is growing in other parts of the world. Thank you so much.
I will say, in the United States, I've been watching this with just fascination and excitement, because I suffer from a terminal case of optimism, where I genuinely think, despite evidence to the contrary, that things will work out. Especially now in my country, dear God. Anyway, I've seen so many of my lawyer friends start working in a field we call collaborative law. And that's where the lawyers themselves are like, hey, this is the kind of practice I do. I'm happy to work with the other attorney, and we're all going to work together to get something really great. But I'm not going to do the stupid legal punches where we're having conflict for conflict's sake. And seeing those attorneys work together is fantastic. They do a great job. It's so much better for the family. You're also not wasting money back and forth and all of that emotional pain by having to go through negotiations that are starting from not a good place. And so I'm really excited. I hope that catches on elsewhere. I'm sure there are other places that do this. I will say India is, I think, the place where I am just seeing the most hope and interest in mediation, and where I have so much excitement for. When I judge mediation competitions, the talent is just extraordinary.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Anybody else with any questions? Any student? Do we have any other faculty members?
Yes, Ayushman, I have some set of things I have observed. So I just want to discuss that. First, I would like to request ma'am to share their research so that I can share this research with my student, and will get their feedback on that. And I am confident that they will learn something new. And I have one thing that we have seen people committing suicide after failure of this mediation and complex judicial proceedings. And I can surely say that if we have a robust mediation system, that can save some new life, because people are not having that much of faith in complex judicial system, especially in our country, where there is a like pendency of cases, and it takes so much time to solve a problem. So what is your say on this?
I'm really curious, how long would you say on average would a divorce
sometimes
take, or custody
sometimes it
from
takes
start to
years,
finish?
like 10 years, 15 years, that much of time.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, wow. That is an extraordinary amount of trauma when I
Yeah.
think from a mental health perspective.
Yes, yes, because of that they
In the
commit
United
suicide.
States,
Yeah.
we think that it takes a long time if it takes a year total for all the motions, all the courts. So I'm readjusting what I'm thinking, and I appreciate that perspective very much. As a mental health therapist, I cannot imagine that amount of trauma being added to a situation that is already very difficult.
Because
I think about the trauma on the two people, I think about the trauma on the children, on the entire family system. And if they're not getting mental health therapy during that process, that's deeply concerning to me.
and unfortunately that there is very less literacy regarding mental health in our country. Recently we have seen IT person, Bangalore based IT person, he committed suicide only because of this family dispute.
Oh, that's
And
so
you
painful.
can
Actually,
check.
it's all over the news actually,
Yes,
right,
yes,
Arun?
yes.
So thank you so much, Arun, sir, for bringing this up. It's actually a big news here in India. And he was frustrated with the judicial proceedings, and in fact, he accused the judges of harassing him as well.
Exactly.
The judges and
The society, exactly, because we have a society that accept male as a person who has done all the wrongs. So that is like normal perspective in South Asian countries. They blame a male person especially for all the problems.
So that says a couple of things to me. One thing I'd be really curious about is how are people being supported? Obviously, the judicial system is causing a lot of harm, how these things are handled. And I wonder, how are males being supported either by their friends, their colleagues? What do we have to support these people through that? Because that is extraordinarily painful.
Exactly, because of that, they have no other choice to commit suicide, and that is a very like concern that we need to discuss and we need to talk on. Well, and
In Australia, they had a
and
couple of years ago, it may have even been a decade, I'm old and I forget things. They noticed that they had a rising level, a very concerning rising level of suicide amongst males.
exactly,
aged
exactly.
like 25 to 50. And as a country, they decided to hit an alarm bell. And they created a lot of really great programs. Some of them are a little expensive, some of them much, much cheaper. I don't know it's available. In Australia, they started a lot of places where you can call to talk. They do text, which some people are much more comfortable in text. It's anonymous, so you don't have to let other people know exactly your business or be tracked down. And they started groups for men. They also put up billboards about how important mental health is for men. So here in the United States, men die sooner. And one of the reasons is because they won't go to the damn doctor. It's very upsetting. And so then they get, if they're not nagged to death by their wife first, they end up finding conditions much later. So
Yeah.
we've gone on to this huge thing of essentially society being like, go to the doctor. Being a strong man means go to a doctor. And I think reinforcing that in a societal way might be really helpful.
Yeah, but as we have observed that there are societal taboos that if you are male and if you went to this any psychiatrist for mental health, etc., it means you are a weak male. So that is one of the problem also. Well,
Okay, so I don't know how many people are on this call that are on the program, but I have to say, each one of you, I want you to spend at least once a week, say to anyone around you with all sincerity, how you've been thinking about things, and ask, why aren't we talking about this? You don't have to go on a soapbox or yell at students, but just bringing up how important that is, because each one of you occupies a position of privilege. Your
Yeah.
education affords you that, and that's where change starts.
Yes, yes, and definitely we will work on your advice and organize a legal aid, camp to nearby places to make people aware on this subject.
And just having me, thank you so much, because I did not realize how it appears with mental health. And here, Dr. Verma, you had a mental health professional come to your
Yes, ma'am.
class, which
We
is
are privileged.
amazing. And I'm so
We are
grateful for
privileged to
that.
have you, ma'am. And I must say that it is a excellent research in this field, and association of this medical science with the cognitive behavior of human beings and its impact on society. And unfortunately, I have seen very less research in our country on this subject. That the effect of the that this cognitive behavior of human being and its impact on society, and especially brain, because we have one branch of law, that is neuro law. And France is the, I think, only country of few, one of few country where they have dedicated law, that is neuro law. So they take help of this medical science in legal sphere, and the results are outstanding. And unfortunately that most of the countries, especially South Asian countries and some of Western countries, they have not allowed this new branch of law. And this is very promising, because you can make people fool by your statement, but you cannot make your brain fool. And by studying the function of brain, we can understand whether one person is saying the truth, or is trying to disguise.
Thank you so much for having me. I did include all of my contact information. I'm not a super polite person. I sincerely mean it when I say, please contact me. Questions, thoughts, anything. I would love to hear from each and every one of you. I learned so much, and I am so grateful for that.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And one thing I have noticed, that you were discussing about silence. And unfortunately or fortunately, what we can say, that silence is not an issue in South Asian countries, as we practice to remain silent and do the meditation. This gives us extra energy and power. So silence is not a problem for us.
The silence masters.
We are mastering silence, yeah.
Silence is uncomfortable. That's when you see we have the right to remain silent, but no one does. Like watch Law and Order, they never do, and you're like, shut up, don't talk, no, please stop talking. But no one does.
But if someone asks us to remain silent, we are blessed. Thank you. Okay.
That is so good to know, because I did not know that, and I'm coming from such a different cultural perspective that I'm going to cut that out next time I do any speaking in Southeast Asia, because they'll just be like, we can teach you some things, ma'am.
Because we have great philosophers like Buddha and Mahavir. So in their teachings, they teach us to remain silent. You just need to speak whenever it requires only. In fact, Mahatma Gandhi was also favoring this. So they were saying that please don't talk if there is no necessity.
See, in America, we have a saying about how if you don't speak, people may not know if you're wise or very unwise, but as soon as you speak, they're going to know. So it's better to be quiet, but no one does. We can't help it.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am, for sparing your valuable time and giving such insights in this subject. And I hope that we will connect again and discuss on any important subject. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yes, please. Thank you. It was nice to meet all of you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yeah.